Now, I would like to continue speaking about a number of the archaeological sites which are mentioned in Sefer Melachim, and that also you will explore in your trip in Israel in March. Now, we had just started speaking about how the major strategic weakness in this city of Yerushalayim is that there was no water source within the city walls. The major water source was called the Gihon Springs, and it was about here. So the strategic weakness of this was that if the city was under siege, the city would eventually run out of water. Now you may ask, so then why weren't the walls expanded to include the Gihon Springs? And the answer is that then the city would have lost another strategic advantage. And that is that if the wall was made here, an attacking army could attack from above and also see the people inside. And that is why the walls are kept here. So an attacking army has to go up over a mountain, down a hill, into a valley, up another mountain, and then over a wall. Now, there were two ancient solutions to this strategic weakness of the city. The first one is now called Warren's Shaft. It is called Warren's Shaft because it was found by an English explorer named Sir Charles Warren in the late 1800s. Warren's Shaft was merely an expansion of an already existing cave, meaning that they found a cave under the city and they expanded it so a person could walk or crawl in it more easily, and they expanded it so it actually reached the Gihon Springs. So here is Warren's Shaft, how it looks now, and as you see, it's basically a cave. Now, it is the type of cave which is called in geology a karst. A karst is where you have hard rock, softer rock or dirt, and then again harder rock, and water erodes at the softer rock or dirt, and that creates a natural cave. The obvious issue with Warren's Shaft is that it was very tough for a person to walk in it, and also it was very labor intensive in that it required a person to physically carry the water. So it can only help the city when there weren't many people in the city, and while the people still had the energy to actually do it. And that's why this first solution is replaced by another one. Now again, Warren's Shaft was made at approximately the year 1800 BCE. Now, the next solution to this strategic weakness of the city is the construction of Hezekiah's Tunnel, which was an aqueduct. An aqueduct is a tunnel or a pipe that is constructed at a slight angle so that the water flows on its own. So here on this picture, you're able to see Hezekiah's tunnel, and it reaches to this pool within the city walls. The amazing thing about this aqueduct is that, as you see here, it actually still works. So that when you are walking in it in March, you will be wet. So as you're seeing here, this guy, he's walking in there, and there is water in it. Now, there were a number of advantages to Hezekiah's tunnel over Warren's shaft. One was that it was much less labor intensive because the water flowed on its own. And the other thing is that Warren's shaft in many areas is very shallow. So it was very easy for an enemy army to find it and for them to either block it off or to just totally destroy it. Whereas Hezekiah's tunnel was constructed very deep under the earth. So it would have been harder for an enemy to find it, and it would have taken them a long time to block it off. Now, a person may ask, how was a tunnel using ancient tech made that was so deep underground and that was made so accurately? And the answer is that they had two teams who worked on Hezekiah's tunnel. There was one team who started at the Gihon Springs, and another team started within the city walls. Now, each team had a group who worked above ground, and then another group that worked below ground, actually digging. And the reason why you had two groups is that one group was in charge of digging, and the other group on top would then bang on large rocks and on the ground in order to keep the people underneath on track. And then when the people underneath reach a large rock, they would also bang on it so that the people above ground would be able to be telling them whether they are still on track. I would like to speak about an issue that has been brought up a couple times in class, and that issue is there archaeological evidence for any of the stories that we are learning about in Sefer Melachim and other places in Tanakh? And also, are there other primary sources that confirm the events for which we are talking about? But I think that before even starting to address this question, I would like to start out with a principle that was the first principle I learned in archaeology in my first course in archaeology at the University of Michigan. And that is, a lack of evidence is not evidence. What that means is that when you do not find evidence, all that means is we have no evidence that that event occurred or that that person existed. But it cannot be taken as proof that that event never took place or that that person never existed. And a very good example of this is what we had just spoken about, Warren's shaft. Now, this shaft is talked about in both Sefer Shmuel and Melachim, and it is called in Hebrew the Tzinor. And until the English explorer Sir Charles Warren found it in the late 1800s, there were Bible scholars who argued that these events never occurred, and the Tzinor is a fiction. But we found out in the late 1800s that in fact it was not a fiction. And this just reinforces the idea that a lack of evidence is not evidence. Just because you have not found evidence of something yet, that does not eliminate the possibility that there will ever be evidence found of it. Now, the first document that I would like to speak about is the Tel Dan Stella. A stela is a large monument or rock upon which in the ancient world they would write about an important event like a war. This Stella was written under the authority of the king of Aram, and it describes his battles against King David. And he wrote it in Hebrew because he was writing it in Israel, and he wanted to show off his triumphs over King David. So it talks about how he initially lost against King David, and eventually he triumphs over King David. And these events are described in Sefer Shmuel. Now, I would like to also focus upon the fact that this is in fact Hebrew, and it looks nothing like our Hebrew. As we had spoken about 2 weeks ago, the Hebrew that we now use for our alphabet is in fact Katav Asherit, Assyrian script, and that this is how the original Hebrew alphabet looked. We use the Assyrian script because after the Babylonian exile, many Jews could not read Hebrew. So in order to save the Hebrew language and the ideas which were written in Hebrew in the Torah, they started writing Hebrew in Katav Asherit, in the Assyrian alphabet. So over here, you are able to see the actual Tel Dan Stella, and that is in fact Hebrew. Next, I would like to talk about the Jehoash Inscription. The Jehoash Inscription describes a number of events which are recorded in Sefer Melachim, primarily the repairs which Jehoash makes to the Beit HaMikdash. Jehoash was the son of King Achaziah, and the way this document describes these repairs matches up with how it is spoken about in Sefer Melachim. Next, I would like to talk about another primary source, and that is the Amarna letters. This is a stela, and it is a primary source written in Egypt. It relates to the Hebrews' wars upon the people of Eretz Canaan as it is recorded in Sefer Yehoshua. Now, I would like to stress that this was an extremely cursory survey of these issues and these documents. There are entire university courses that exist upon each of these documents, and there's much scholarly debate upon many of these issues that I have just mentioned. For example, when it comes to the Egyptian stela and the Tel Dan Stella, almost everyone argues that these are primary sources that date from the time of the events for which they describe. However, when it comes to this document here that talks about the son of King Achaziah, there is much scholarly debate upon whether or not this source can be called a primary source, meaning whether or not it really dates to the time period of Sefer Melachim. So again, I hope that you've found this interesting and that it will be food for thought.